All right, so I'm representing today. It's Valentine's Day, y'all. Love is love. Uh, all right, so the message for today: wax on, wax off, embracing the building blocks of our greatness. And let me just find myself. All right, I see where everybody is on the screen, and this is a quote we're going to share today from Henry David Thoreau, who wrote Walden. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now, put the foundations under them. Say that again. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now, put the foundations under them. So, wax on, wax off. I know that's a pretty cheesy reference to use, but I felt like it was so universal. I know you all know exactly where that comes from. The Karate Kid, where the kid wants to learn karate to defend himself. He goes to the old man, and the old man, is supposed to be teaching him karate, and then the kid gets frustrated. He's like, "Man, when you gonna start teaching me karate?" And then the old man teaches him that actually, when he'd been teaching him how to wax on and wax off the car, he actually was teaching him some of the fundamentals of karate. And I can tell you that in my life, life is definitely like that. I've experienced a lot of times where I've gone through something that seemed to make no sense at all during the time that I was going through it. And then somewhere way down the line, that experience that I thought was a complete waste of time ended up being an important preparation step for whatever experiences I never knew that I was actually going to go through. And I certainly wouldn't have known how to prepare for. So, but I do have to admit, no matter how much I know that life is like that and how much I believe that God is at work in my life, directing my path, those quote unquote foundation building phases in life still frustrate. I get impatient, I get anxious, and then I start thinking I'm off course. And then because of my human forgetfulness, I begin to experience suffering. Now, remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Pain in life is inevitable. Willis is going to make sure we experience a little bit of pain every Sunday morning, just a little bit. But suffering does not have to be a part of our experience. Suffering is usually something we do to ourselves. When we take the pain and disappointment that we're feeling and we manufacture some meaning, some particularly unhelpful meaning to go along with that pain. And I've heard so many sermons about the importance of having patience in the midst of God preparing us for our promise. And I've gotten a lot out of each one of those sermons. But no matter how many sermons I hear on the subject, when I find myself going through that time when I don't feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, it still sucks. Just that's all to it. I can't say it any better than that. It just sucks. And I'm trying to get better about it. And I imagine that if it's something that I'm working on, how to, really embrace that time of building foundations, I bet it's something that that everybody else is working on too. And so hopefully this is valuable. So here's the first thing I want us to keep in mind during our foundation building phase. And this is something I know is just a reminder. We all already know this. A lot of people don't want to see us be successful. A lot of people are not rooting for our success. A lot of people see that castle that you've built in the air, and they don't want you to ever reach it. And when you're working through some things, that building those foundations, you're working through some things that might cause you some degree of frustration and self-doubt. That's when they see their shot. In fact, that's their only shot because they know that they are powerless to actually stop you from climbing up to your castle, powerless to stop you from building your foundation. But they might take that one little thing where you might feel insecure, and then they try to magnify it and distort it, right? Like one of those old fun house mirrors. And maybe, just maybe, they can get you to doubt yourself enough that you self-limit, that you self-sabotage, and maybe you might even self-destruct. And if you do those things, you will never reach that castle. Which is why the second thing I want to share with you all is so important when it comes to this foundation building phase, right? And that is the importance of your spiritual regrounding practice and your ritual. If there is a major public service announcement that I think God would want me to share with other Black men as often as I can, it's this. Don't let anybody judge your practice or make you feel like you're not quote unquote spiritual because your path doesn't look like theirs. Respectfully, and I do say this respectfully, I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of brothers don't fool with church. Sometimes some churches, not all, some churches have a certain way of doing things. And if you don't do it that same way, you will, unfortunately, you will feel like you don't belong. And sometimes you might not even feel like you're welcome. And what's really, really unfortunate about that is that I think sometimes brothers experience that and then they throw out the baby with the bathwater. When the reality is that you can pray and meditate in a lot of different ways. And you don't even have to call it prayer. You don't have to call it meditation. You don't have to call it anything. The key is that you find a way, whichever way it is for you, to make what Howard Thurman describes as the longest journey we will ever make, the journey from our heads to our hearts. And I would say that we have to find a way to connect with that part of ourselves that is universal, that part that goes beyond the physical, that part that knows things that you can't explain how you know them, that part that is so connected to the universe that it doesn't end where you think you end. Some people get there through art. Some people get there through music. Some people get there through physical activity, running, cycling, this thing we call broga. Again, it doesn't matter what it is for you or what you call it. If it works for you, keep doing it. If it stops working for you, find something else that feeds that part of you and opens you up to a blissful experience in the midst of what might be a prolonged period of in-betweenness. And that's why it's so important, because none of us really knows just how long we'll be in this incubation period. We don't really know how long we'll be in this foundation period, building these foundations under these castles. It's not like college. It's not like grad school where you get a syllabus on day one and you know exactly where you are. And that's why it's so important. The third thing that I want to really be for the last thing today, and this is the importance of having spotters. Now, some of you all have heard me talk about life lessons that I've learned from NASCAR. And in NASCAR, the guys driving the cars around the track, they're going about 180 miles per hour. So when you're going 180 miles per hour, there is no time for looking in the mirror, right? So the cars don't even have mirrors. Every team, every guy driving around the track has a team. And one of the members of his team is somebody sitting way up on the grandstands with a headphone, a headpiece, talking to the driver in the driver's helmet. And that person on the grandstands, they're telling the driver what's going on around the track, because the driver, again, driving almost 200 miles per hour, has a very narrow perspective. The person on the grandstands, the spotter, he has a broader perspective. And it's the spotter's job to let that driver know what's going on around him on the track. And that's how we are in life. We're in the car, we're driving as fast as we can, trying to keep up with the race and just not crash into anything. So we need folks in our lives who can give us the benefit of their broader perspective. I want to wrap up our time together this week with a story about a time when somebody spotted for me. Now, I have to give you all the backstory. And as you might imagine, there's always going to be a story about my dad, or almost always a story about my dad, right? So this one, I'm about 15. I've picked up the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I read it. And like many 15-year-olds, I decide after reading one book that I'm going to change the whole direction of my life, and I'm going to become a preacher, and I am going to save Black America. And I figure I'm going to do that by becoming a minister, right? So time goes by, and I get this really incredible opportunity. I get a full scholarship to Morehouse, right? And again, I want to save Black America. Y'all remember that, right? So I tell my dad, I want to go to Morehouse, and I want to major in religion. So y'all have heard enough stories about my dad. Y'all probably already know what his story is going. So my dad looks at me, he's got this real serious look in his eye, right? He says, religion. Well, seems to me, you can read the Bible on your own time. You need to make some goddamn money. Which, for those of you who have met my dad, Tony, you can probably hear that in his voice. So after majoring in computer science instead of religion, writing software for IBM for a few years, going to business school, working in investment banking, corporate finance, and eventually real estate development, I realized that whatever it was calling me to seminary to study religion, it wasn't going. So at 37 years old, I decided I was going to apply to seminary. So I'm sharing this decision with a buddy of mine that I'd met in business school. And he said, man, I'm really proud of you and I'm really happy for you. And then he kind of chuckled and said, but I got to tell you, John, the only person surprised by your decision to go to seminary is you. And we need people like that in our lives. You need to have some folks around you spotting for you so hard that they can see you winning. They can see you taking your game to the next level, walking into your season, even when you're in the car driving too fast to have that perspective for yourself. It might just feel like you're driving around in circles, but your spotters bring you the benefit of that broader perspective. They've been seeing your next step. They've been seeing you winning. They've been keeping you lifted up in their practice, sending you light, support, and strength for the journey, just waiting for you to get to the point where you can see what everybody else, even your haters, could see, that the castle you've built in the air is closer than you think. Now, as is our custom, as we end our weekly reflection, I ask that you all would join me in this intention for our time together. Let us be intentional that our broker practice might be a living metaphor for our life practice. And so it is.
And so it is our intention.
Let us be intentional as we set aspirational goals for our strength and flexibility on and off the mat, our castles in the air, that we will be patient, confident, and confidently patient, knowing that as we build the foundations higher to our desires, that our desires simultaneously making their way to us. And so it is.
So it is
Our intention. Let us be intentional as we build our individual practices, that we each will continue to contribute to building Broga into a collective practice that benefits each of us individually and collectively, as well as our families and those we touch far beyond our time on the mat every day. And so it is.
Our intention.
Finally, brothers, let us be intentional as we spot for each other, as we support, encourage, and yes, often clown each other, that we appreciate how good and pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together. Let us be intentional not lose sight of how important we each are to each other and to the world around us, a world that needs us to be loving spotters as it builds the foundations of its future as well. And so it is. Our intention. As always, we pray these and all things in the names of both our ancestors and our unborn grandchildren. Amen. Ashe. Namaste. And so it is.
And so it is.
All right. I don't know if, can y'all see, I tried to, I'm going to set up another camera. I just wanted y'all to see